You're listening to Season 5, Episode 2 of Vixen, a Black beauty and pop culture podcast. If you enjoy what you hear today, please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. Today's episode is on supermodel and beauty icon Alek Wek. Now, let's start the show. Hey y'all, welcome back to a brand new episode of Vixen. So today we're going to get back in our supermodel bag, our top model bag, our icon bag. We are going to be talking about the very, very iconic Alek Wek. I'm going to go ahead and get right into this episode because I feel like it's probably going to be a little bit of a long one. But before we get started, I do want to let you guys know we're not going to dive too deep on the topics of violence and war and things like that. But I am going to touch on it. So I just wanted to give a trigger warning to anyone who might be sensitive to those topics. My main source for today's episode is Alek's autobiography. It's called Alek, My Life from Sudanese Refugee to International Supermodel. Highly, highly recommend this book. It was very good. It really tells the story of her life from A to Z. Really, really good stuff. I wish I could have included more from it in this episode, but it was going to be way too long. And I also pulled from interviews and other clips and things like that. But if you guys are interested in Alek's life, I highly recommend that y'all read this book. I believe it's been re-released since its initial release. And I think they altered the title a little bit. But either way, very good book. Highly recommend. And let's get into the episode. Alek was born on April 16th, 1977 in Wau, a village in the northwestern section of what is now known as South Sudan. She was born to Akul and Athene Wek. The couple had 9 children. Alek is the 7th. Akul was a housewife and Athene worked as an education official. So he was kind of on a the school board for their city, for their town. I believe actually, it might have been for the entire state, but it was basically the equivalent to a school board. Akul and Athene did not play about education, y'all. I mean, clearly, because her father worked in education, so of course, but they took the education of all of the children very, very seriously. Their father made sure that they all spoke Dinka, their native language, and Arabic. The family was considered middle class. They lived in a 2-bedroom home. They didn't have any electricity or running water in their home specifically, but they had a very great home life, very positive, very tight-knit. As a child, Alek really loved to spend time with her siblings and her parents. She constantly reminisces in the book and in interviews I've read about just simple things with her family, having tea, eating bread, walking to school, coming home. She has really, really fond memories of her life with her family when they were all, under one roof. And I feel like that's the beauty of having a large family. I don't have that. I only have one sibling. But I feel like people who have multiple siblings, y'all have the best stories about y'all's childhood. Both parents disciplined their children, but Alek says that her mother was serious business. She was nothing to play with. Her father treated his wife and his daughters with the utmost respect, which was very different for the environment that they grew up in. He constantly was speaking confidently, not only about them, but also over them. And I love that. First of all, I know that's right, Athene. When you have daughters or when you have, you're raising Black children in general, it's always such, it's always a very positive thing to speak positively over those children so that they go and reflect that, in their own conversations. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I know I definitely noticed people, even my age now, I'm 28, people whose parents constantly empowered them and spoke positively about them and on them. You see that confidence brimming. You can always tell people whose parents were very on them about that. So I loved reading that. I loved that little tidbit. So I had to share it with y'all. Alek did suffer severely from psoriasis as a child. Here's a condensed quote from her from a Daily Mail interview she did in 2007. "It terrorized me. It was agony. I would scratch in my sleep, wounds everywhere. I've got to keep my hands like this." She folds her fingers into a protective ball. "My mother is yelling at me. Open your hands or they'll stay that way and you're not going to be able to do anything." She holds up one misshapen finger which didn't heal correctly despite her mother's efforts. End quote. So in 1983, things started to shift in Sudan. The Second Sudanese Civil War, a continuation of the first one, started up again between the government and the Sudan People's Liberation Army. So the very first Sudanese Civil War ended in 1972, and then, of course, this second one kind of ramped up a few years later, but it didn't really get bad in Wow, where the Wek family lived, until about 1985. Both the government forces and the rebel forces were very active. So people were getting caught in the crossfire of that. Some people were being directly targeted because of that. So you can just imagine how dangerous it was. In a 2018 interview with The Guardian, Alek said, "I vividly remember asking my parents, why do we have to leave? Why is the town burned down? Militias would come in the middle of the night and you'd hear screaming and shooting, and then the next day, people had disappeared." She has described smelling rotten bodies in the streets. "The police ran out of ammunition and could no longer protect us, and that's when we realized we just had to go. Nobody can comprehend what we went through." End quote. So one day during this time, the Wek household was unfortunately hit with multiple bullets and it was set on fire while the family was inside. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the Weks made the decision to leave town immediately. So the family flees Wow, and it is a extremely difficult journey. Like, when I say that this journey really took a toll on this family, it truly did. And I know there are so many other stories out there that are similar to theirs or are even worse than theirs. But it's amazing to me that people were able to leave the places that they've known forever and like go on these very difficult journeys and survive. And it's amazing to me, but I just cannot wrap my head around the terror and or the way that they just must have felt. But anyway, let me go ahead and get into it. It is very hard to read and listen to stuff like this because it's just like no family should ever be put through this. Mind you, it's 9 children, 2 adults, so there is 11 people, a family, just trying to like get to safety together. And they're doing this on foot, by the way, y'all. They used the sun to navigate and figure out the roads. They ate whatever they could find on their way. The family hopped around. They would spend like some time in one village. They joined cousins of theirs on the countryside. At one point, they were barricaded in a hut for 3 days when the more frequent bombing and shooting started to gear up. And in many of the areas they ended up in, there was no medicine available. A few of Alek's siblings caught malaria, and her father became ill as well. He was supposed to have an operation to remove the metal pins from his broken hip before the war started to get really bad. But with this journey, his hip became infected, unfortunately. The Wek family then came back to Wow, and it was completely torn apart, y'all. A lot of their neighbors had fled just as they did. The village was ravaged, and the people who had stayed behind were living in the local school with basically no food, no nothing. At this time, Athene, Alek's father, his infection became even worse, and he had a really bad hemorrhage. The family had to risk further travel and go to Khartoum, but once they got there, they realized that they didn't have the funds to pay for the treatment. So Alek was sent to Khartoum shortly after the family had got back to Wow, and then the rest of the family joined her 3 months later, and they were hoping to get the treatment for Athene, but they could not afford to pay for it. Sadly, Alek's father, Athene, passed away at a relative's home in Khartoum. He left behind his wife and their 9 children. Before the Second Sudanese Civil War broke out, one of Alek's older sisters had moved to London with her husband and started a family of her own. So that sister applied for refugee status for the entire Wek family. Like, she basically applied for asylum. After Athene's death in 1991, Alek and one of her younger sisters were able to join their older sister and her family in Hackney. And in that interview, in that interview with The Guardian, Alek said of this time, "I was just like, what is this place? Where am I? It was bloody cold, but I threw myself into everything. I learned to swim, ride a bike, and ice skate. I was the #1 triple jumper," end quote. So Alek really did hit the ground running as soon as she touched down in London. She learned to speak English very quickly. She started studying fashion business and technology at the London College of Fashion. She worked multiple odd jobs in her spare time just to be able to send money back home to her family. And her psoriasis cleared up. So she was doing the damn thing. 2 years later, Alek's mother and two more of her siblings joined them in London. And then the rest of the family kind of stayed split up. Some of them settled in Australia and settled in Canada as well. So let's fast forward a bit, y'all. So everyone is settling into life in London pretty well. Alek is 18 years old. She's thriving. She has plans to attend Central St. Martin's in the fall to study painting. So one day while Alek was at a food market, a scout approached her and asked how she would feel about modeling. And at first, Alek was like, absolutely not. Alek brushed the scout off because she was very focused on school. And I don't even think she thought the lady was serious. She was just like, girl, whatever, I'm about to go study painting. But one day the woman called and asked again. And Alek was into it this time because she was like, okay, I personally don't have any interest in this, but who wouldn't want to play dress up and get paid for it? And her mother was quite against it, but as us girls do, Alek did it anyway. And her mother eventually agreed to allow her to go to New York and explore modeling during the summer, if and only if she came back that September for school. Before she knew it, Alek was signed to Models One, and her very first gig was an appearance in Tina Turner's video for GoldenEye. So GoldenEye is the song from the James Bond soundtrack, so this is a really big deal. In a 2020 interview with Vogue, Alek said this about shooting the video for GoldenEye. The video was my first booking as a model. I remember going to the casting with this little Polaroid in my book. I must have been about 17 or 18 at the time and had been living in London for a few years. The funny thing is, I almost didn't do it because there was this one scene where I had to swim in a big tank and I could not swim to save my life. But they said, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Started really early in the morning. Tina came when we were doing wardrobe and she talked to each one of us and said, I appreciate you guys. Like, who does that? It was the sweetest thing. She must have been just wearing her sweatpants, pajamas, and maybe a jacket. I will never forget that. Years later, I met her and she still remembered me, end quote. So y'all, Alek never came back to London for school in the fall. That summer, she went on about 15 to 20 go-sees and castings a day for about 6 weeks straight, which is how she booked Italian Vogue, her next gig. Her career really started to take off at this point, thanks to her simply just standing out. She was so different from anyone else who was modeling at the time. Like, Alek, of course, is very striking. She was so different from her peers, and people were obsessed. They were obsessed. So after doing the video with Tina Turner, Alexander McQueen directly requested to work with her for his next show, and she started to get booked for a ton of other runway shows. She opened and closed the Ralph Lauren show. She walked for Donna Karan, and she closed Calvin Klein's show. She was then signed to Ford Models, and she was named Best New Model at the Venus de la Mode Fashion Awards. She just was like taking off like a rocket, y'all. Here's a quote from Alek. I didn't think anything of it. It was one of my first big shows, if not the first, and everyone kept asking me how it felt because I was so exotic and different. I told them fabulous because it was a great experience, but I didn't see myself as different or exotic. I'm just Alek, and besides, all women, whether blonde or brunette, are different and beautiful. In 1999, Alek was chosen to depict the year 2000 for the Pirelli calendar, Women Through the Decade. The vision for the shoot was for Alek to be wearing all black, so the stylist put her in full latex, naturally. Once she finally got it on, it took a while for her to get this on. The photographer, Herb Ritz, saw it and he hated it. So they ended up peeling all of the latex off, and they shot her naked, oiled, with her hair in spikes. It was very, very 2000. Alek said, I was still a virgin and didn't want to be naked in front of a man, but my agent said to me, you're good, you're safe, and they're going to celebrate you. So I ended up getting waxed, which I had never done in my life, and then I was oiled up, and that was it. The vision he had was truly amazing. I felt so celebrated. That image is everything, end quote. She not lying. That image is definitely everything. So her rise to stardom was really, really fast, but Alek and her agent, Maura Rowe, they knew what they were doing. Maura and Alek knew how black models were often put into boxes in the industry. That was something that Alek really, really did not want. And they worked together to make sure that that never happened to her. Alek refused to go to castings for gigs that specifically asked for black women. She went to castings for makeup brands even when she was like discouraged from going to those. And she was choosy about like the way she was treated. Like if there was like a shoot with like unsafe work conditions or like the weather was really bad, she wouldn't do it. Like that type of thing. Here's what she had to say about Mora when she was asked who her biggest mentor was. This is from an interview she did in 2012 with Forbes. "I'd have to say it was my agent Mora who helped to guide my career early on. Her enthusiasm and commitment to making sure that I had a shot in this business has inspired me from the beginning. She's the one who made the call to Jill Ben Simone at Elle and pushed for me to be on the cover. I appreciate her willingness to push the envelope, and because of her hard work, I've had an opportunity to have a long career that continues to this day. I learned from her that when you believe in something, don't stop until you get the results you're seeking, no matter what." So as you can see, the two of them worked so well together. It's said that that is why Alek left Ford Models to go to IMG, because Mora left Ford for IMG. Alek says that the way that she was marketed at Ford limited her and the jobs that she could get. In an interview with the New York Times, she said that some people at Ford said that she would never sell, that she was too dark, meaning that she would never sell magazine covers. People said she would never get makeup jobs, and I mean, they were lying, clearly. Like, they don't know, they had no idea what they were talking about. So I feel like it was probably easy for her to make the jump to IMG once Mora left. Hey y'all, so I know we're all excited to come out of this pandemic and get back to our regular lives, but let's be honest, we've been through a lot these last 2 years. You might feel like you need to step back, reassess, process it all, set new goals, or just talk to somebody. I was feeling the exact same way, and I just had my very first session with my new life coach, Tola Maria. I ain't gonna lie, y'all, I was nervous, but Tola made the space very comfortable. I felt safe, and I felt like I could be open and honest. Although she made me comfortable, she did not hold back, y'all. She definitely told me about myself. But it all felt really constructive. I got some good tips. It was definitely eye-opening and very much needed. Having a life coach is something that I think Black women can truly get a lot out of. So I've partnered with Tola Maria, life coach, to offer my listeners 12% off their bulk sessions when they use my code VIXEN. You can use this code on her website, which will be linked down in the show notes. And you can find her on Instagram at T Maria Life Coach. That's TMARIA Life Coach. And don't forget to use code VIXEN and let her know that I've sent you. That year, Alek had another music video appearance in Got Till It's Gone by Janet Jackson. She was named MTV's Model of the Year, and she appeared on the cover of the November 1997 issue of Elle, becoming the first African model to get the cover. I know that's right. So at this point, y'all, Alek is unofficially the most in-demand model for the season. She's everywhere. Everybody wants her there. She's on top of the world. Alek being on the cover of American Elle was a huge deal, and in the book she talks about how she had to fight for it because a lot of people did not want to put dark-skinned women on the cover. It wasn't just Ford, it was the magazines, it was everybody, because they thought that the magazine would not sell if someone that dark was on the cover of it. And it wasn't that models as dark as Alek didn't exist, it's just that they didn't have the type of mainstream success that Alek had. And ironically, after all that noise, Alek's cover ended up being a huge hit. So her cover was sold out everywhere. It got a very positive response from the magazine's readers. People constantly stopped Alek on the street, and when they recognized her, fans wrote to Elle saying how refreshing and affirming it was to see a dark-skinned Black woman on the cover. People loved it. Jill Ben Simone himself was quoted as saying, "There are a lot of women who look like her in America, and they don't find themselves in any magazine." End quote. So the cover was so popular that Alek was invited to appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah actually told her, like, if you were on the cover of a magazine when I was growing up, I would have had a completely different concept of who I was. So this was a really, really big deal for somebody as dark, with African features, to be on the cover of such a mainstream magazine like that. If you have not seen this image, please Google the cover. I am going to post the cover on my Instagram. But it's just striking. Like, and that suit she had on, everything. Whoever styled that, fire. She looked amazing in that. I wish I looked like that in a suit. It was bomb. Anyway, let's talk about Alek's feelings on this cover. Alek, again, remember, she's somebody who isn't trying to put themselves in a box. She's not trying to be defined by the way she looks. And she was very happy that she could be an inspiration for women that looked like her, but she did not want it to define her career. So here's another quote from that Times interview that kind of puts her feelings into perspective. She's thrilled about her Elle cover and understands that it may carry deep meaning for some women, but she does not want a career based on her color. She noted that in Sudan, there's nothing special about her looks. If that makes them feel more confident to see another sister modeling, that's great, she said of the cover. There are a ton of Black girls modeling, and each one is special. When I talk, it shouldn't just be the Black girls listening. End quote. So I want to know what you guys think about that. My thoughts are, this is, although like I feel like it's a huge deal, I absolutely get what she's saying. And it's like, I am a Black woman, but I'm also just a beautiful woman. I am a bad bitch. I look good. I look bomb in this suit. And women everywhere should listen when I speak, not just Black girls. I'm not only doing this for Black girls. There's a ton of Black girls modeling. There's a ton of Black girls who have similar features to me, you know? So I like that she wasn't trying to rest on that and make that be her shtick, because I think she knew from reading her book, and those who have read it, y'all let me know what y'all think. I think she knew that if she were to categorize herself as that, as like some kind of like that's what she was fighting for, like some kind of martyr for that, I think she knew that her career would not be very long had she put herself into that box. So she always went out for things that may have not necessarily called for someone who looked like her. She always went outside of the box, and she never like penciled herself in. And that's something I can really, really appreciate about Alek and her career. So we cannot talk about the iconic Elle cover and being the first African Black woman on the cover without talking about another Alek moment that we all know and love. And it was the wig toss heard around the world, y'all. So in 1998, Alek was walking the runway for Betsey Johnson. Suddenly, she ripped the blonde wig they put on her off her head, child, and she tossed it. In an interview with the BBC, Alek said, "That wig was not just about me taking it off to make a scene. It was a time that I was just starting in fashion to work. And the one thing that I told my agents was, if you are going to represent me, I'm not going to be a gimmick and be in for a couple seasons. You're going to take it all or leave it." End quote. So today, that moment still resonates with a lot of people and has sort of become like a symbol of a symbol of rejecting European beauty standards. So when I see it, I love when people post it. I'm going to post the clip of her tossing the wig. But when I see it definitely reminds me of like rejecting those standards and just being like, this is me. I'm not about to wear this synthetic blonde wig down this runway. I'm about to rock my cropped cut like I always do, and I'm gonna kill it. So I love that she did that. And like I was saying earlier in the episode, you can tell when somebody's parents really spoke confidence into them or like breathe confidence into them, because to do something like that, I can say most people wouldn't do that. Most people walking down a runway and getting paid down that runway would not have ripped that wig off. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to rip their wig off in that show, and they didn't. So that moment was just everything. That was the first time I've seen Alek, actually. And that is what I always, whenever I think of her ripping that trashy blonde wig off. Period. How do you guys feel about that moment? Do you feel like it was impactful? Is that something that you remember? What do you guys think about that moment? I always think about that whenever I hear her name. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts on it. Like, do you guys feel like that was impactful? Did you feel like it was like a gimmick? Like, what did you guys think about that? I want to hear what y'all thoughts are. Alek continued to enjoy more success into the 2000s, snagging her first feature film role in The Four Feathers as a Sudanese princess named Akol. One of her most notable supermodel moments was becoming the first Black woman to walk in a Chanel haute couture show. In her 2020 interview with Vogue, she had this to say about the moment. During the fitting for the show, Carl told me that I had inspired the dress. He showed me the sketch. He did not want a veil or anything on top of my head. He wanted to make sure my face was seen. I remember tearing up. It felt very emotional. As the first Black woman to walk in Chanel's Haute Couture show as the bride, I felt it really set the tone. It sent a really positive message about diversity. When you're nervous at a show, you either cry or you laugh. I remember walking out onto the runway laughing and squeezing Carl's hand so hard. That was such a moment. While her career continued to flourish, Alek almost quit the modeling game actually, and this is something that I did not know about her. It was a thought that she had around the beginning of her career, just thinking, it just wasn't for her, and then she had it again about 5 years in. At that point, Alek had started to focus on the future and just think about, other streams of income and what else she could do beyond this. This reminds me a lot of what happened with Beverly Johnson. I did an episode on her. I think that was season 3. Yes, she was in season 3, I believe. And it was a really big thing. I remember when I read Beverly's book, it was a huge thing for her to transition from supermodel to businesswoman when she started her hair company and things. And I believe that she had that same feeling like a few years into her modeling career. So Alek did the same thing. And in 2001, she launched a line of designer handbags called Wek 1933, named after the year her father was born. And he was actually her inspiration for the structure of the bag. The bag, it kind of looks like a briefcase. I believe most of them were snakeskin. I couldn't see like the full line because a lot of things are not properly archived from 2001, like websites. But from what I saw, they appeared to be real snakeskin. The structure was very, very briefcase-like, and this was inspired by her father because he carried a brass clasp briefcase every day. In 2003, Alek started seriously dating real estate professional Ricardo Salah. She purchased a home in Brooklyn. She took up painting again, and she got into her humanitarian bag as well. She became an advisor to the U.S. Committee for Refugees Advisory Council, which focuses on raising awareness of the plight of refugees worldwide. She worked with World Vision, Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, and she became a Goodwill ambassador for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Here's a condensed quote from Alek's 2020 interview with Vogue. "The first time I came into contact with the UNHCR was in South Sudan when the war was going on. When I first started my career in fashion, the war was still happening. So I sent a fax to the organization and I made it clear that I wanted to utilize my voice to discuss what was happening in South Sudan or Sudan in general. At the time, there was no South Sudan. I continue to work with them, particularly when it comes to the importance of education in girls. With feminine hygiene, for example, it's especially important as many girls do not go to school when they are on their period because of the stigma. For me, it's always been vital that I use the platform I've been afforded in fashion to shed light on important issues." End quote. In 2005, Alek returned home for the first time after Sudan signed their peace agreement. So this agreement basically brought in a new constitution. It delegated power, and it gave measures for sharing power. It talked about country security, wealth distribution, all of that. Alek's experience was captured by BBC for their Africa Live series, and they followed Alek and her mother Akul as they tried to track down Alek's long-lost aunt after the war ended. Alek had this to say about the trip. "When I look back at that time, so many things come to mind. I felt that these memories, going through war at a young age, were a story that needed to be shared. I knew I really needed to find a publisher to put it into writing, and that is how the book came about after the documentary. The process itself was very difficult. There were days I had to stop because I had to address deeply painful and traumatic moments, including losing my father. All of that was very raw. I knew, however, that it was important to have those parts in there because it would not be as authentic without the honesty. And after having gone back to Sudan with my mother and having filmed the documentary, there was no way that I could have just transitioned right back to work as normal. It is like you can cry and you can laugh and then you can grow from it. So that is what I did." In 2007, Alek's autobiography, Alek, From Sudanese Refugee to International Supermodel, was released. I love that she said that. It's like you cry, you laugh, and then you grow. It's all a process, and there's no way to experience something that traumatic or revisit something so traumatic and just go back to business as usual. Like, there's absolutely no way. So I love that she did that. And I really love Alek's humanitarian efforts and just how consistent she's been with them throughout the years. 2012, Alek returned to Sudan to celebrate the first anniversary of the country's freedom, as well as the South Sudan independence referendum. So this was essentially a referendum that helped decide if South Sudan should remain a part of Sudan or become its own country. So the UN Refugee Agency accompanied her on this trip to highlight the stories of refugees that were also returning to their homeland and to document the efforts that were made to stabilize the country of Sudan. In the late 2010s, Alek continued to throw herself into her humanitarian work, but don't think the girl wasn't still booked, y'all, okay? So throughout the last few years, Alek has walked for Marc Jacobs, Savage X Fenty. She did 4 covers for Brazilian Elle. She starred alongside Tilda Swinton in Suspiria. She did design work for Rag & Bone. She presented Demna, I can never pronounce his last name. I believe it's Vasalia. So she presented Demna Vasalia of Balenciaga with a CFDA award. She did multiple shoots for Brazil, Portugal, and Ukraine Vogue. She did Harper's Bazaar. She did Elle Again, Days. The list really goes on and on. Not only is she still modeling, she's still painting. She has also picked up gardening, writing, playing the violin. She's a jack of all trades, okay? She does it all. She lives in Brooklyn. She's just doing her thing, you know. And that is pretty much Alek's story, her rise from being a Sudanese refugee to an international supermodel. She's still very beloved, very coveted in the fashion world, in the humanitarian world. A lot of Black girls, dark-skinned girls specifically, look at her as like a dark-skinned icon. That's what I call dark-skinned women who, you know, have made me see my own beauty and made me feel represented properly. You know, dark-skinned icons. Alek is definitely one of them. So I want to end this episode with a quote from Alek. She gave this quote to Forbes in 2012. "Beauty is subjective and should not be limited to only what we see on the outside. I meet and talk to women from every corner of this planet, and I can find beauty in each and every one of them. Beauty does not mean one thing, but not something else. There is no one size fits all in beauty. When I first entered the fashion industry, my look was considered exotic largely because I'm a Black African. My skin defined me whether I liked it or not. I was darker than most, and many people seemed afraid of that. But then, one day, Jill Ben Simone, then the creative director of Elle magazine, defied the odds and put me on the cover. The year was 1997, and it changed everything for me and my career. The response was overwhelming from thousands of women who found that cover shot liberating. Ever since, I challenge people to prove to me that beauty is defined by only one look. Beauty comes in many shades, shapes, and colors, period." End quote. Period. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Vixen. I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you guys for the love on the first episode of the season. Again, I am so happy to be back. You guys have been asking me for another poll. Follow me at the Vixen Memoirs. We do a lot of really fun polls where I ask you guys questions just to see what you guys think about certain things, and then I do an episode on your answers. They always have different topics. We be having a lot of fun on Instagram, y'all. So follow me over there if you haven't. You can join the book club at thevixenmemoirs.com. Call me, beat me if you want to reach me. If you have a question, complaint, submission, anything, you can reach me at VIXENPODCAST@gmail.com. And again, I will see y'all next week for an all new episode. Thank you for listening to Vixen. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a review. If you have a submission, feel free to email vixenpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with an all new episode.